So what I'm saying is there's got to be a way to have a life that is outside of mobile devices. There's got to be a way to bring people back to where they know, and it would probably be almost like an insurrection, like a boot camp, almost like detoxing them, taking them to a camp where there's no device, not even an iPad, not even a headset. Kids would probably be crying. Some would accuse that of being, torture or like cruel and unusual punishment. I'm thinking, to what level of ridiculous have we risen? Really, folks. To the point where we're fighting and advocating for our children to continue being dependent and being spoiled. Yes, I said it. Spoiled by nonsense. And now what we're telling them by renaming a school and removing the name of an historical figure that was part of a Confederate army. Okay, so what's the offense? What's the offense? Well, that person was Confederate, and that was for slavery, and we can't have any of that. Well, who said we do? Can you point to a family in America or any place in America where a person is a slave? Literally, I'm not talking rhetorically, I'm not talking allegorically. Well, I slaved like a dog at this job and they weren't paying. That's not slavery. People, get real. Slavery, I'm talking, well, there's racism and discrimination, blah, blah. That's not slavery, people. That's discrimination. Slavery, do you know what slavery is? Do you look back at the history and see what slaves were put through? They were beaten. They were killed. They were lynched. Okay? There was death, and there was, there were people that, slaves that, they were treated like property. And I'm not saying there aren't people with that philosophy, but that's not tolerated. People don't buy people in America. Yeah, there is slave trafficking, and it's horrendous, and it's illegal. And I totally stand for doing away with that and incarcerating anyone that does it, because it's against the law. And there is slavery like that happens, but it is under the lid. It's under the radar. And it's illegal, and if it's caught, it's punished, or it should be. And I will be the first one in line to say it's time to do away with trafficking. And it happens in other countries. But let me tell you something. By and large, look at America, and slavery is not in full swing. You cannot tell me or convince me that slavery as a norm, which it was back in the 17 and 1800s in America, is a norm or even close to it now. And yet we want to keep bringing it up and saying, well, we need to educate our people about slavery. Well, that's fine. We should educate people about slavery. It should be kept in our history books because it happened. It was wrong. There were people who did those things and had slaves, and that was wrong. But even then, and there is more literature about how they were truly treated, and not every slave was treated the same. Am I justifying slavery? No, I'm not justifying it. But to just go ahead and say, well, let's just rename everything. You could say, well, would you name a school Hitler? And if it were, what would you say then? Well, absolutely, that would be ridiculous. But Hitler was not an American hero. Hitler was an enemy of our nation, an enemy of the state. We would not name our schools Hitler. So what you're saying is basically that some of these Confederate people, do you really know if every Confederate believed 100% everything that everyone is doing or believed it was right? It's part of our history. It's part of the Civil War. Is it all correct and right? No. But does that mean we need to go renaming everything? For that matter, Washington owned slaves. Are we going to rename Washington, D.C.? Are we going to rename the state of Washington? Thomas Jefferson was a slave owner. Are we going to go back and rename every high school, every institution that's named Jefferson? Are we going... Seriously, I mean, we are more caught up to the point of ridiculousness about this whole thing. Someone told me recently, well, it's not just a reference. Yes, you can say, well, that statue's there as a reference. No, there's others that say, well, it's really not a reference, it's reverence. People treat it as though that's the way it should be. You know, if we really got serious, people, and we really look and say, okay, we've got some people that were good and some people that were bad in our nation. So, should we just start tearing things down and saying, it's a new day, it's a new history? Guess what? We've got generations now and generations after us that have not even been born, that if we do that, they will have no concept of what this nation was or where we've been, good or bad. History is not moral. History is history. Were there immoral things in history? Yes. Is there immoral stuff going on now in modern history? Yes, and in droves. But it's history, folks. It is amoral. It does not, amoral is not immoral. Amoral means it has no morals. It is a story, good or bad. The Bible has stories of King Ahab and wicked kings. And then it has stories of good kings. And it has the stories of vile people like Jezebel. Do we cut out Jezebel because we don't want to remember Jezebel because she was wicked and because she killed people? No, we tell the stories to learn from them. We remember the stories, we keep the stories because it tells us what happened so we learn not to do it again.